And it's not even just that they've cut our economy and the capacity for the economy to grow. And quite frankly, American reputation is trash. Now, y'all, I mean, y'all know I don't mind saying that because I say it regularly because I do travel internationally. And we already had the stereotype of the loud, ignorant American marching through everywhere trying to take everything. But now it's like not only are you loud and ignorant, but you also have a dummy leading you because your economy is now in the tank for self-inflicted reasons. None of this was necessary, but the harm is lingering. We saw reports that out of every group that suffered with an expansion in their unemployment rates, Black women in particular were the group that suffered the most. Black women, which also happen to be the group of the demographic that is the most degreed as it pertains to education. And I know that in the state of Maryland, you all have a sizable number of women from that demographic. What sort of supports do exist currently? Are there any supports for people who are either a part of the federal government, this purge that is taking place? And this purge, frankly, has not been even as extreme as I expected it to be, considering what was Project 2025 was talking about with Schedule F and their 4-part effort, parts 2 and 3, which included getting all the resumes they could from the most conservative people that they could, and then training them to fill these positions, these 50 to 60,000 positions they plan to free up by firing civil servants after the implementation of Schedule F, that executive order that Donald Trump implemented that converts civil servants into like political appointees. What are we to do as it pertains to the people who were victimized by this effort, purged from the government, particularly considering getting a good government job was how a lot of Black people understood their access into the middle class?
Yeah, I mean, that's how my family got there. My parents were both, my father worked for the federal government, came up through the manpower program in the civil rights era, worked his way up in the Department of Labor. My mother taught in the public schools in North Carolina and Virginia. So, yeah, that's how we did it. And I've worked for the federal government, not just now in Congress, but at Department of Justice and other places. So it's extremely damaging and has a huge impact, especially in areas like my community, Prince George's County. But 80% of federal workers live outside of the Washington, D.C. area.
Whoa.
So part of the blowback the Republicans have started getting is their federal employees, whether it's the post office, whether it's the Social Security benefits people, whether it's the VA office nearby, they're starting to lose these services or having restricted access to them, and they're starting to complain about that. I think as far as trying to help our government employees who've been pushed out, one is I think we have to keep fighting in the courts. I think a lot of these government employees, depending on how these cases play out, might have the ability to get reinstated. I'm hoping even for potential back pay, because a lot of them were just fired illegally. And, the government needs to be held accountable for that. The Trump administration needs to be held accountable for that. We also have to try and do things to help them with the transition. We had a town hall event a little while ago that helped. Michelle Singletary came out of the Washington Post, tried to help people figure out what to do with as far as their finances and their credit and those sort of things. We're looking to do another one of these to help people deal with if they're having challenges with their mortgages. How do you try and renegotiate that or get some forbearance? And there's some people, we had mental health services we're trying to expand. A lot of folks in very tough situations, under a lot of pressure, trying to find ways to help them with that. And then, of course, finding another job is critical too. We did a job fair a couple of weeks ago. Some of my other colleagues in the DC area are doing those too. Governor Moore from Maryland is trying to help people find positions with the state that are comparable to what they had with the federal government, so they can make that transition. So we're trying everything, to try and figure it out. We're fighting the Trump administration, pushing to block what they're doing, trying to get people reinstated. But we also know that there are people who've been forced out and they can't wait to have things resolved in court. They got to find a new job now. We're trying to help them do that as well too.
I'd like if we could, and again, I'm so grateful for your time. And one of the reasons I do rapid fire questions, because we never know how much time we're going to have before somebody call y'all to go vote on something on the floor. So that's why we try to get as many as we can. But I want to turn towards what life looks like in the aftermath of all of this. And let's pray and hope that people do the work and we're able to mount up sufficient defenses against disinformation and misinformation campaigns and do that work. But in addition to this show, I run a law center at the Center for Law and Social Justice at Medgar Evers College based in Brooklyn, New York. And one of the things that we are always concerned about is what the environment looks like for people who are in our primary target group. And that is people like us from our communities in New York City. And we are now in a moment where people are fighting for democracy. And I'm putting that in air quotes. But I wrestle with this idea of fighting for democracy in the absence of a conversation that includes what reworked or new version of diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to have to look like. Keeping in mind that we have had democracy in this country for multiple centuries, and for all of those centuries prior to before the last one, we had enslavement of African people. So you could have democracy and entirely participate in the slave trade in ways that are completely anti-democratic. We've seen it done before, and so we know it can happen again. I am not interested as either a radio host, as someone who is a nonprofit leader, who is running a law center that looks at these issues. I am not interested in fighting for, even though voting rights is our bag, like that's the bag we sit in, voting rights, police brutality, we sit in those civil rights issues. I'm not personally interested in fighting for a democracy that does not have a vision of racial justice that is squarely at the center. And while we are seeing people in Congress and in the Senate talk about reclaiming the House, and I believe we could still get the Senate back. I don't understand why people would be conceding the Senate. I think we could still, if people did the work, we could do that. But I am utterly uninterested in doing either of those things if we are going to do so such that we revert back to the democracy of the 1930s and 40s. And so what conversations are your colleagues having about what a reframed racial justice analysis and approach to democracy will look like in the aftermath of this current era?
Well, I think that's a great question. And the vision piece, I think, is a lot of it's been there for a while. It just hasn't been ascendant within the Democratic Party, and certainly not the country. But, the George Floyd bill, which I'm going to reintroduce later this month, basic criminal justice protections for people on the streets. We saw that shocking verdict, frankly, out of Tennessee last week, where 3 of the officers who, beat a man to death who was unarmed and begging for his mother and not resisting anymore, fully acquitted the guy. So, I mean, we know that there are still challenges that we have to keep pushing on. You mentioned voting rights is another one. They keep trying to gerrymander. Thank goodness we got people like Mark Elias that are fighting that on behalf of not just Democrats, but all Americans across the country. But I think we need to make sure we put a full agenda forward that counteracts not only what Trump is doing, but helps us get back where we were and move beyond that in the direction that we were, I think, trying to go towards. The trajectory after the election of Barack Obama got totally derailed by McConnell and the Senate Republicans.
Right.
And we haven't fully recovered from that. Biden had a great first 2 years, I thought, from an economic expansion standpoint. That Trump's going to try and take credit for, but trying to make sure we had programs, for example, to help young people. If you don't want to go to college, but let's say you want to go get a good union job, you want to do like sheet metal, or you be an electrician or something. He put funding in place for the training for those kinds of programs through unions and the like, and then programs, construction deals. Not just like Trump's doing just to line his own pockets, but really just to get out there and say, okay, NVIDIA, if you build a new plant here, we're going to put up X billions of dollars to help you do that. But you've got to hire folks and move them up who aren't in that field already, and give Americans a chance who haven't had that chance before. Give them a chance to get the skills and participate and move up the economic ladder here in the country.
Yeah.
Biden was doing a lot of that stuff. He's gotten zero credit for it, sadly, but we've got to move back towards getting that back in place. Trump's talking about trying to bring these businesses and companies back to the United States. He's trying to do it with the tariffs. That's not going to work. You need to use incentives to help get the construction part done. But when you do that, the incentives are taxpayer dollars from Americans. We've got to make sure it's benefiting not just the people who are shareholders and investors, but folks who so they can get the types of jobs and get back into the work world, or get into the economy for some folks for the very first time in good paying jobs with benefits and the like, union jobs, in my view. that give them a chance to move up and have families where you can get the house, you can send your kids to school, whatever they want to go to college, great. If they want to go to a training program, great. They have health care benefits. We got to make sure we get back to providing those types of things that the Trump administration has damaged so significantly in just 100+ days.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because I do think we have to be comprehensive, and we've been every other week or so we have a wonderful editor of Rewire News Group who joins us, and she's recently written, Imani Gandhi is her name, and she had recently written an article looking at the Brazilian model of racial justice, which incorporates quotas. And her theory of the case is that, look, we tried diversity, equity, and inclusion, which was really just a hack to a multi-century agreement that white Americans had to create a caste system that excluded Black and other non-white people from participating. So DEI was sort of a hack around that, and we've seen that they hacked the hack. And so she has suggested that we should perhaps look at the Brazilian model of racial quotas, such that a portion of positions and seats and opportunities are reserved according to the racial demographics of the community. So the Black community would have a set, the white community, Latino, and so on and so forth. And then you have the general operating pool that would be available to anyone. So I know that quotas and things of that nature are typically verboten terms, to call back up my German, but decent verboten. But I think that as we are in an environment right now where we are seeing white Christian nationalism unapologetically inject itself into the civil discourse, we are seeing the violent component of white Christian nationalism insert itself into our immigration policies, and we are really seeing a clanocracy, is what I'm trying to call it, attempt to reassert itself. So as we have conversations about racial justice, I want to plant a seed with you and everyone who I talk to, that we need to also be having conversations about the things that typically people did not want, because it would provide too much justice to quote the Supreme Court when they said that they were not going to do away with the federal death penalty because it would require too much justice. So that's just me talking to you. Do with that what you will. Just share with your colleagues that we need to be able to somebody need to say quotas, because if we start with quotas, then they're going to meet us in the middle. We don't have to have the quotas, but if we threaten the quotas and that sort of effort, that's just for me to you, just something for you to think.
I hear you. And the other thing too to remember is we should vote with our dollars. It can be a boycott or it could be more affirmative. We target companies that are really, looking out for us, moving us up, hiring us, catering to us, from a goods and services standpoint. Let's reach out to the folks and take care of the people who are taking care of us, as opposed to the companies that made promises and commitments, but then walked away from them when Trump got in office. So Reverend Jamal Bryant down in Atlanta, I think, is doing excellent work there. And I think we need to expand that, here in the Congress, but across the country. Let's make sure we're hiring people. Let's make sure we're buying from people who are looking out for us and taking care of us.
I don't know if you meant to have a pun there, but you said let's target, and I thought, ooh, that was kind of dope. All right, final question. I know you got to go. I'm really grateful. What are your thoughts on what's happening with immigration right now? We saw Mayor Ras Baraka. We had him on the show yesterday, and what happened to him, Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, Bessie Watson. I mean, we've seen some really horrible stuff. Any final thoughts on how we, the people, should prepare for what is coming in that regard?
Yeah, it's scary stuff. The deportation efforts are, lawless. You got the Trump Supreme Court said, Kilmar Arbrego Garcia is from my district. The Trump Supreme Court says bring him back. He didn't get his due process. Trump's trying not to do it. So you've got courts across the country, pointing this out, and they're trying not to do it, and they're trying to expand it. This stuff about habeas corpus is insane and scary. And, to the extent he expands it to include American citizens, I think the African-American community really needs to be on guard for that, because where that can go and how it can go quickly. And I got to say this too, the sort of efforts to bring in the white Afrikaners, suspend all kind of hoops. They got any kind of process. They just come here, and as soon as they get off the plane, they're American citizens being welcomed by the Deputy Secretary of State. That's shocking. That is shocking. But that is, I think, an indication of who he thinks he wants to look out for and who he doesn't.
That's right.
The same day he brings them in, he cuts the TPS status for Afghans who helped us during the war over there, saved American lives. He threw thousands of them out of the program just for no reason, just on a whim.
Well, he said that he wanted the immigrants who could readily assimilate. Do with that what you will. But I don't know that bring in Afrikanerlizers, because I know they go by Afrikaner, but we've been calling them Afrikanerlizers. I don't know that that's well, it ain't the type of assimilation that I want.
Yeah, amen. And I've got a bunch of Afghan refugees in my district,
wow.
And it's going fine. I just they started restaurants, they're starting to do businesses, the kids are going to school. I mean, and we owe these people, right? These folks put their lives on the line to help us out during that time of war. No matter how you feel about the war,
right?
They came up and stepped up and they did what we asked them to do.
Right.
It's a total betrayal to treat them like this now.
And I remember protesting that war, even though my daddy was fighting in it. So there's that. Representative Ivey, it's been a real pleasure having you here. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us and giving us some time. We've been trying to really make sure that we don't just have conversations with elected officials during election year. I need our audience to know who our electeds are, what their roles are, and how we engage with them to the best of our ability so that we can really do the work of making this world a better place. For people who want to follow you, support you, volunteer, connect, or do the work of helping to make your district better, what's the best way for them to do that?
Send me an email. I'm glenn.ivey@house.gov.org. I think it is.
See, now look, we'll find the right one and we'll put it out. You don't use that email.
Yeah, I don't email myself too often, but it's Glenn with 2 N's and Ivey, Ivey.
Thank you so much. We'll tweet that out and get the contact information out there. Really appreciate you being a part of this conversation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks so much. You keep up the great work. You're doing fantastic things to educate the public, and we need the information to get out now more than ever.
I appreciate that. I'm just trying to uphold the standard that Baba Joe Madison left for all of us, and we can't have him ashamed. So, because he will come back from the ancestral realm and say some things. Thank you, sir.
I just remembered it again. Glenn.ivey@mail.house.gov.
There we go.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Thank you, Representative Ivey. Appreciate you.